So we're going to pick up in our book. Just to remind you, we'd worked through most of, I believe, chapter 1 and 2. I don't remember the chapters because I'm doing it by the content, right? So, yeah. So most of chapter 1 and 2. I think we came up a little short on chapter 2, but there was plenty to do, right? So what we're going to work through today is kind of moving into chapters possibly 3, 4, and 5. A little progressive, I think, but I think we'll get where we need to get to. So our purpose for this session is to really delve into the experts, right? What's happening out there? What's the work that's going on? And then we want to be a part of that struggle, be a part of that success that is navigating the classroom while balancing all of the everyday school distractions that we're faced with, because we want our students to improve in literacy. All right? So for our inclusion activity today, I read this right out of the book, completely caught my eye, immediately put my little sticky note in here and went, aha, anticipatory set, let's do it. So, the focus question, and I just take 2 minutes individually and silently to jot down thoughts about this question in general. What core books are you using with your students in your class this year? And then, once you've established that, what are some possible reasons you are using those books? So jot down, again, this first 2 minutes is individually and silently, and then you'll get a chance to discuss. So go ahead and jot that down. What core books are you using with your students, and what are possible reasons you are using those books? That chance to dive into that, hopefully that kind of set up some thinking. That's actually right in the front of that chapter, and it's so much as says to the point of that we determine the books that they don't think so much about the books, but about the students that they have, and the books that would be the fit for the students that they have in front of them, right? And so there's some determination in advance, but they think about the students that they have in front of them and the skills that they want to delve into, which I thought was an interesting response. So our outcomes for this session, again, to really get into our instructional beliefs, routines, and philosophies around teaching literacy in our classrooms. That's what we spoke to a lot in day 1. So here we sit in day 2, where we're going to get into this mapping for reading and writing instruction over the course of the year. And then we'll get into those maps around the genres and the feedback and evaluation, possibly a little bit on feedback and evaluation today, at least a start to that, but then we'll have those last 2 days to really get into the writing types and those other pieces that are in the later chapters. But we're going to work more specifically on that second outcome today around mapping for reading and writing instruction over the course of a year. So our agenda is to delve into some key components of mapping that year of reading, then the key components around mapping out a year of writing and what that might look like, and then, again, as time allows, getting into that whole idea of feedback and evaluation overall. So before we delve into that, I kind of teased out the problem of practice. I wanted to pull this up for a second. So I'm going to step out and make sure you know how to access. Are around the independent reading, delving deeper into book clubs, looking at student tools, and then the whole idea that I just teased out from you is this idea of core texts and what that looks like. So we want you to delve into those discussions. So as we've been doing, though, I want to launch with Penny and Kelly delving into this map. Independent reading. So I'm sure that all of you have taken a shot at independent reading, or if you haven't, you're nervous to maybe try. Or for those of you that have, you've kind of gone back and forth and you found what works. And we even heard from last time this whole deliberation of how much time, how much frequency, all these different pieces. Well, I thought it interesting in the chapter, and so the activity we're going to look at is tools. So obviously we know kids are innately not going to come ready to do independent reading. It's either not been built within them, or they are struggling to take on the skills that we've been trying to give them to move forward. So they share a list of tools that they present. And so we thought, well, let's get you into these tools and see what you might make of those tools, right? So you have the opportunity to delve into the tools and see what they look at. So at your table, we're going to have you get into partners. And as a partnership, and you may want to share this because we're going to lead to a pair square. So if you're at a table and you're partnered with somebody on looking at something, you might want to make sure you pick different tools so you can highlight the different tools. But if you look in the book to page 57 through 63, they pull out different tools that they utilize with students around independent reading. So as partners, select a tool, or if you wanted to take two, we're going to have you discuss, take notes, analyze that tool, and then you're going to, as partners, share it with your table group. And then what we'll do at the end is just kind of have some of the conversation come out. I did say if you do end up selecting the same tool, you can just go deeper on it. But we'll probably have tables share out something unique from the tools you discussed. All right? So in partners, pick a tool. But no, at the end, we're going to like pair square. So you're going to talk about two different tools in depth at your specific table. All right? So what questions might you have around this activity? Okay, so hopefully you got a chance to get into some of that thinking around what it might look like to map out reading. And as you know, that's going to be the habit that I kind of hinted toward. We're going to work that into then this afternoon. So we'll take a lot of this thinking that we've started now, and you will be given that time to really delve into what will mapping out your reading unit overall. And we'll take a good chunk of time this afternoon on that. We also will transition into writing. So we'll take a portion around the reading, looking at where you are around in reading, but then we're going to transition into writing as well. So nice little video to kind of kick off some thinking around this, and we'll hear from the experts here directly.
Your comments about the paragraphing, I think one of my favorite.
All right. So as far as you've gotten, if you need to finish up another sentence or two, fine, but as far as you've gotten is where you need to be. And again, decide as a group where you'd like to center that conversation. It could be working through each of the three questions. You could focus on one and spend the whole time on it. We're going to give you about 5 minutes just as a table to discuss which of these units are already happening in your current scope and sequence of writing. Which adjustments might you consider in your current scope and sequence of writing based on some of this? Or which of these units might you need more practice or learning in? Knowing that all three, right, are always going to be constant questions we might be asking of ourselves on an annual basis, potentially. So go ahead, we'll take 5 minutes. It's just an open conversation. And I'll probably have three tables just kind of share out what's happening in the group just to get some of that learning or conversation into the larger room. So we'll take 5 minutes and then turn to that. Questions that you might have. All right, go ahead. All right, so to make sure that our whole group can kind of hear some of the great learning that's happening at your tables, let's take three tables, or at least three opportunities for sharing. Who would like to share some of the great ideas that were discussed at your tables?
The second one about adjustments, I did that this summer. I
Okay.
read the book over the summer, and 27 years of teaching, took a little of that in the corner of your chunk and applied it to this, and I cannot believe the difference. Did it take time? It took a full month of my summer.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Was it worth it? Oh my gosh. Even Mary, who teaches a grade ahead of me, she goes, your students are able to do this and this and this. I'm like, you wouldn't believe the difference.
Okay.
I am totally amazed. I'm just saying, listen to her. But I don't teach reading. I only just do the writing. So I've made it work just for the writing part. But
Okay.
wow.
So you've taken some of those adjustments into consideration and you have seen a big increase in students. Now, skills, engagement.
Everything. Well,
Cool.
like right now we're in the informational unit.
Okay.
So I'm giving them infographics on the computers that they're seeing, because some of them, they have to zoom into things. And then they are doing notice and note in their journals. When we first started with the very first one, it's just, what is this saying?
Right.
But then after doing them for 2 weeks, we were able to turn them around to, what does this mean? What does this say about China if they're still putting 8.8 million metric tons of plastic garbage into the ocean every single year? And all the other countries are down here at less than 1 million, and most of them. And then it was neat for them to, then they start interconnecting, because they're like, oh my gosh, well, China's overcrowded, so they probably don't even be able to do landfills, and they probably don't even know what to do. And it was just neat to, they're analytically thinking. I love it. I love it.
Great. I think you mentioned before, too, the notice and note. That's a separate resource, right?
But she mentioned it in here.
Okay.
I did not know about
Okay.
put it in here.
So if you're not familiar with Notice and Note, there's an informational text version and a literature-based
Well,
version.
on the main website of Notice and Note,
Yep.
they have 6 that will cover any single thing that you have. So I just made those 6 posters. I just made them big and put them
Perfect.
in my room, and that way, no matter what we're going over, they're still hitting it, so they don't have to memorize new ones.
Okay. So in Notice and Note, they speak to key. I'm a little. It's been a bit, but they call them signposts, right? And so the kids are speaking to signposts, so it makes kids aware of things to look for intentionally in text. So that resource is supporting some of that scope and sequence. So that's a separate resource reference in the book, but just to highlight that. So, thank you. And 2.
Yes. Laurel shared with us something that she's doing to support this whole idea of narrative writing. She's involved, or she's going to have a student class starting tomorrow in the NaNoWriMo, where during the month of November they write a whole novel. And she did it herself last year, so she now has this mentor text that she's written that she can
nice.
share with kids. So it's just as far as the modeling, doing the work that you want students to do and to really engage students in such an authentic task. I mean, I was really excited about it.
Great.
And sharing with us
Well,
on the table.
I'm glad you highlighted that. And actually, for both of you willing to share that out, Danielle and Laurel, let's boost them for a round of applause. So I think it's difficult to take that step of change. So those that are willing to share the change or step, and so maybe Laurel, we can step in a month from now and maybe here. I may not remember that, but certainly bring it to our attention. Don't be modest, please. Great. In the back.
We are at middle school level, and we just recently adopted Mrs. Hawkins.
Okay.
So we have not started the writing units yet. Of course, with Common Core, it's the narrative, the discussion, and the argument.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to be interesting and refreshing is that how we've been teaching writing has been very together, and it's worked for us, but minimal choice for the family.
Okay.
It's completely teacher directed. Yet moving into Lucy Hawkins, I can see that there will be so much more choice for the students, especially like with research and various topics.
Great.
So we are in a great area right now. We're just learning.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, so and that would be great to have these insights as you're living that sequence, right? To see how it's fitting, and I would gather that it's going to be very similar. I'm sure there's a lot of setup in the writing that would be very similar to this. And that's really the thing, right, is we want you to take these resources and apply them to your craft. So that's awesome. So thank you for putting some of that thinking out there overall. All right, so the next piece I wanted to get into, because I get asked so many times about conferring. What does it look like? How much time does it take? Etc. When I am doing it, how do I know if I'm doing it right? So we're going to delve deeper into conferring, which I had other hopes, but I knew this might happen. But this, I thought, was a really good discussion around the balance of talk and conferring. Because I know that's something that maybe we worry about is who's supposed to be doing the talking and what does that look like. So here's a model of that.
Because I struggle with that too.
And basically, I get asked all the time, what about conferring? And I know I had those same wonderings myself. So a little insight there, a little tips and tricks of what they've worked through. But on page 94, they speak very specifically to that honing the skill of conferring. But then we're going to frame with these 2 questions. So what was confirmed that you already thought around conferring, or what's new learning that you'd like to try around conferring? And if you haven't done conferring before, I guess you're going to be living in the new learning you'd like to try, although you might have some insights into what you thought it would be, and that might be confirmed in these pieces. So again, let's take about 5 minutes. I'll kind of check in. I don't know that you'll be able to get through it all, but we'll get as far as you get. We'll be good far enough. And then we will follow through on this activity to set up some further dialogue to tease into this idea of what conferring is and what that looks like. What questions might you have? And we'll take 5 minutes, and this is just analyzing. I'll step in again before we go to partner conversations. All right, go ahead. So one of the things we took from, which by the way, the whole feedback piece, right? We did take your feedback into consideration. the next chapter, chapter 5, we're not going to have a chance to delve into this, so I'll just move this to the next time, so we'll delve into this piece. I think it's a huge component. We'll look at this balancing feedback and evaluation piece next time for sure. So we'll push that to that, and we'll probably get an informational text definitely the literature piece and possibly informational next time. We also, remember I suggested that because we were canceling or we had to not because of low enrollment for those other courses. So I know one of the things was technology. So I know that I'm having Craig come in. He's going to do a small portion of this morning specifically around that technology piece, and so how some of those technology tools can build into this. So that'd be about a 20-minute to a half-hour segment or so of our morning time in December. So I mentioned that because we weren't able to offer that, we would integrate it. So that'll be integrated into our next portion overall. Another piece, speaking of feedback, you spoke to the idea of wanting to maybe know a little bit more around at least the titles and what that might move toward. And so these are the hot or not articles that are out there. The myth of the culture of poverty, to know and to be known beyond the diverse book lists, be their advocate, children's right to read and our responsibility to protect them, teaching sight words as you would other words, and then teaching with graphic novels. I think the titles are pretty straightforward, but if you had more wonderings around those titles and what they're specifically about, I do have notes on those pages from those that have actually read them or are analyzing them, or I can tell you more about graphic novels. You should have in your blue sheet where the room, if you follow the column up, that's the room that you will be in for that article overall. Okay? And the protocol you will use for that is in the blue packet as well. Maybe the second to the last page in there. I can't remember exactly what that was off the top of my head, but I know that protocol's in there. So yeah. So on that note, on your last page, around reflection and communication, we have about 3 minutes or so, 3 or 4 minutes to delve into that. But I'd like you to reflect on learning that you maybe had from this morning, or that you want to see taking forward. But some of the key angles to consider, so whether you want to put notes on that back page, we've got kind of that graphic organizer on the very back of the blue packet, or you wanted to take notes in another place that you were taking notes, what might be some things that are vital to communicate back to your building, reading, or writing team, and what's an avenue to actually communicate? So it's one thing to say, I need to take this information back. It's another to consider how you will take it back. That might be an email, it might be a newsletter. I'm not sure quite how you're supporting your building, but think about how that might be shared, and or who, right? So it might be a stakeholder. Like, do I have to get this to the principal, the school improvement chair, if there's another person overseeing coaching, or whichever. So think about those different things and just take some notes reflecting on what are next steps around learning and action around that learning. So we have about 5 minutes before we officially rotate. So if you wanted to continue on a conversation that we'd begun in the morning here, or meet with your group. But again, if you have questions about room numbers, another thing I noticed is that this is actually linked to the articles directly. So you have that PowerPoint through the Google Classroom. So the articles are linked right there. I believe we also maybe posted them, or maybe we decided to link them here. Sorry about that, but either way, not knowing specifically how we handled that, but you have access to those articles. Also, remember at the end, the extra paper copies that we have from our sessions, we will put out at where you registered. So if you wanted a paper copy before you left today, or you thought, oh, I got 30 staff members, I want to do this article with them, take them. We made extras for that purpose. If they're just sitting there at the end of the day, we'll store them for a little bit because we think we may use them. And if we don't, we'll recycle them eventually. So help yourself to the extra copies that may be there. Thanks for a great morning in delving into it. And as you know, this afternoon, we'll take some of that conversation and start applying it to what that actual mapping looks like back at your work and what you're doing. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Enjoy your article conversations. If you decide to do graphic novels, that's me. We're in here. So, thank you.